What's going on, CrossFit West Springfield? This is Coach Will, here to give you guys a rundown of our next gymnastic skill development piece for the month of March. We are talking about the ring muscle up, right? Within this movement, it's a high level skill, so we're going to break it down into 3 different categories. So the first is going to be our grip and hip swing. So talking about that grip, we're going to go over a good way to lock into the rings as we're holding onto them. And then with straight arms, how we're positioning our body within that swing to use our hips. From there, we're going to go into our next movement, our next piece of this movement. It's going to be the transition. So learning how to efficiently use the hip to get over the top of those rings. Lastly, we're talking about our finish and dip. Right? So as we get over top of those rings with that kip and transition, we're going to be focusing on that finish and that lockout position over top of the rings. All right? So talking about common faults within each one of these sections and go over how to properly demonstrate the ring muscle up in full. All right, let's get into it. All right, community, so now we're going to talk about that first step in our ring muscle up. So we're going to talk about that grip and also that kipping swing. All right, so as it comes to grip, we want to make sure that we're nice and high up on those rings so that when we get to our next step, it's easy to transition over. All right, so we're going to talk about our false grip. So we have Ryan holding one of our rings here. Within the false grip, again, that's going to allow us to really get tight on those rings with the palm over as high as we can. So what he's going to do is make sure his pinky ring, his pinky knuckle is going to be directly over top of that. But what he really wants to do is get his wrist on top of those rings to start. All right, from there, after he karate chops that ring, he's going to reach back with those fingertips, and now he's super on top of that ring. He'll do the same with this other one. And then from there, he'll go into that hanging position on the high rings, and he's going to be super high up on that position, and he'll be able to turn over and keep his hip nice and tight as well. All right. Ryan usually performs his ring muscle ups with a variation of that grip. Right, it's not going to be quite as high, but it's still going to have the ring super far back in the palm. All right, so what we're looking for with that is grabbing those fingertips as far through as we can, and as we grab that grip nice and tight, that ring sits super far towards the wrist. All right, that's going to be much better than a fingertip grip, right, where that ring is sitting very high up on the palm. All right, so I'm going to have him place those rings on the floor. He's going to show us 5 hip swings with that grip. Right, before he jumps up, with that hip swing, we're looking for a nice long body, right? Feet should be squeezed. We're going to be one tight unit as we perform 5 hip swings. Go ahead and begin. Stay nice and tight. He's using his lats to pull through into that hollow and then arch position. As you see, his torso is moving back and forth. He's not just swinging his legs. And relax. Now we're going to break down that hip swing. All right, so you just saw Ryan demonstrate our hip swing with that nice high grip on the rings, right? Within that hip swing, we want to be very conscious of 2 different positions. We have our hollow and we have our arch, right? So Ryan's going to grab that PVC and place it overhead in a nice active position. From here, guys, we're going to make sure we're fighting actively towards the ceiling, right? And to feel what we're looking for on the rings, have Ryan go into that hollow position, pulling that belly button in and bringing those ribs down. From here, we're going to go into that arch. In that arch position, we're going to reverse that and have that thoracic extension throughout that movement. All right, so. All right, guys, we just went over our first step to the ring muscle up, talking about the grip as well as our hip swing, right? Within our next step, we have our transition, right? So that transition getting from that straight arm position to that first pull, getting that hip to the rings before we turn over, right? So within that step, a lot of things are happening, right? It's going to be a huge opportunity for us to engage that hip swing and really use our lats to get to that pull of the rings to the hips, right? So that's going to start with the big swing, again, using the lats, right? As we are coming through with that arch, and as we go through to that hollow, we're pushing down on the rings with those lats, nice long body position, and we're slowly getting those rings closer and closer and closer to the hips, all right? as we're going into that big swing in the hollow with the lats, we're focusing on trying to bring the feet to the eye level, right? So getting those feet to that eye level is going to resemble that fully laid out position as we start to bring those feet up, all right? And then from there, we finish with what I like to call the slingshot. It's helping us get those hips up, and as we get the hips up, we're pulling those lats, engaging those lats and pulling those hips to the rings with those bent knees. All right, let's get into a visual representation of how that looks on the rings. All right, guys, now we're gonna get into that second step within the transition. So we're gonna be talking about now our big swing using those lats as well as getting those feet to the eye level. All right, so we're gonna focus on those two within the swing. So we're gonna have Ryan show us those big hollow arch swings. He's gonna be attempting to really push down with straight arms on those rings and then see his feet rise to the height of his eyes or that head level or the area of where those rings are next to his hands. All right. Swing back to that arch, big push. Keep those feet up and relax. All right, from there, guys, we're focusing on getting those hips up so that we can pull those rings to the hips. So Ryan's gonna focus on two things within that slingshot. As his hips start to come up, he is going to focus on sending his heels towards his butt and then really squeezing the butt to get the hips to the height of the rings. All right, so within that, we're going to show 3 of our big swings with those feet to eye level, and then we're going to take those heels behind and bring those hips up, going into that slingshot for another 3 reps. All right. Now the slingshot. All right, guys, we made it all the way to the lockout and finish of the ring muscle up, right? So talking about that finish and then that dip and lockout after we get over top of those rings, right? So we've learned up to this point our grip, our strong hip swing using that hollow and arch in an active position while hanging from the rings. We talked about our second one, which is our transition. We're focusing on getting those hips nice and high to the rings, focusing on that slingshot, right? For transitioning over those rings, we're looking for 3 things. Getting those eyes from the ceiling to the floor as quickly as possible, right? As we know, wherever our eyes are looking, that's usually where the body's gonna go. And if you get over top of those rings, we should be staring at the floor. Secondly, we're gonna have that elbows back position, right? Those elbows transitioning back. We get those shoulders over top of the rings. We also have to make sure those elbows are staying nice and tight to the body, right? The further those elbows travel out, the more chance we have of falling through those rings and missing that rep, right? Lastly, is going to be that dip and lockout to end off that rep on top of those rings. So we'll talk about being really efficient in that low position of that ring dip, right? Having the capacity to be able to hit that, and then from there, using the hip to lock out to that fully extended arm position on top of the rings. All right, so let's get into talking about this final movement and final step in our ring muscle up. All right, guys, before we get to those high rings, we're gonna be talking about that transition to that lockout to end the ring muscle up over top of those rings, right? So while we are catching that position, we're extremely low in our ring dip, right? So the ability to have the capacity to perform that strict ring dip, right, before we even start to attempt our ring muscle up is gonna be key. Just have that basic strength, right? But we're talking about that kip to get up on top of those rings, and we're gonna have Ryan demo it out on these low rings, okay? So he's going to get into his ring dip position, right? And from here, all he has is his shoulders on top of the rings, and after he catches, he'll be in this position, all right? From here, we have a little bit of a pump of the legs that helps us send our body up to that lockout. So I'm gonna have him show us 2 reps of that, all right? So he's gonna bring his feet off the ground, then perform that kip, all right? And relax, right? So as you saw, what a lot of times we see is people trying to really kick down and try to simultaneously press up for that lockout. But as you saw on complete, when he was down with shoulders on top of the rings, the legs came up and that momentum sent the body up. Then the legs kicked down to finish that lockout, right? So that first action needs to come into play with the knees up, and that will send the momentum up the chain. Then we kick down the lockout. All right, team, let's put it all together. So, going from that second step that we have for ring muscle ups, we have that transition. So Ryan's really gonna make sure that through that transition, he sends those feet up, heels come behind as he brings his hips to the rings, and then he's gonna turn over and complete the full lockout on top of those rings, all right? As he's performing this transition, he's gonna think about getting those eyes from the ceiling to the floor, performing that fastest sit-up of his life to get over top of those rings with speed and control, keeping those rings tight to the body, right? He's gonna show us 2 ring muscle ups. All right, team, so that is our ring muscle up. Again, that's going to be our main skill for the month of March. We will have a lot of gymnastic skill development within this month for you to practice. We'll also be closing out the month with our skill clinic with Coach BJ. All right, so that's going to be coming up. So make sure that you are staying tuned. If you have questions for any coach that's around while you're in the gym, please let them know. Let's get to work and practice that ring muscle up. See you.